Hey, what's up everyone? In this video I will show you how I created this Stylized X in Blender, Marmoset Toolbag and Substance Painter. Original concept art was created by Sylvia. I will not try to pronounce the last name. Anyway, you can check out her portfolio using the link in description. This video will be more like a commentary time-lapse. It will be divided into 5 parts: Lowpoly, Highpoly, UVs, baking and texturing. I will provide the timestamp if you want to skip to any part. So let's start. So the first thing I did was bring my reference into the blender and start blocking out the big shapes. I'm not going into the small detail, just making out the big shape by following the reference. Here you can see I'm just aligning my vertices to the reference and using the booleans for the cutouts in the shape. Always avoid going into the details during the staging process because if you want to change something later, you don't have to recreate all the details and waste your time. Here I am repeating the process same for the other big parts. And using the booleans for these cutouts. Also after applying the boolean, make sure to clean them up so you don't have double edges or overlapping vertices. Here I created the an insert shape which you can see on the reference from the highlights and shadows. One thing to keep in mind about concept arts, they were made in 2D, so if you want to create them in 3D, there will be something you have to work around, like the diamond you see or the globe. So I just try to do something that make it look good but also look like the concept art. Here I was struggling to figure out how to work with this diamond. So the thing I did was to move those inner vertices to inside and make them thinner and make the outside thicker. That way if I rotate the diamond, it will fit the shape. And creating a cutout for it in the diamond or crystal using a knife tool. Now I'm doing the same thing for the back part by rotating it about 20 degrees so it's thinner out to the inside and thicker on the outside. Here I am figuring out how to create this handle. As I said, it's not very much easy to follow a 2D concept art. Maybe if you contact the concept artist, they can help you out by telling you how this works, but I didn't try it. Here I am creating the cutouts in the grip area of the leaves or the branches which are used for the grip. I am not following the reference here, just creating random cuts here and there to give it a bit of a difference and they don't look all the same. Also using a proportional editing which you can turn on from the middle top or using the O to deform the shapes. Here I am using a boolean to create the hole for the ring and just giving a simple shapes to the leaves and using the proportional editing to make them like a bit of in a flow shape so they don't look too rigid. Also make sure to check your normal. If they are inverted, they will create problems. Now creating those same cutouts for the leaves by using a knife tool. You can use the C button to cut through the shape. Now here I am giving the sharp edges to only those edges which I want to keep sharp, and all the other remaining edges will be made sharp, or they will get the details from the Highpoly after baking. So just making like the 90 degrees or 80-degree above edges sharp. That's a rule of thumb. If your shading look correct, just don't go with a lot of sharp edges, because the more sharp edges you have, the more UV seams you will have. Every sharp edge is a UV seam, but not every UV seam is a sharp edge. So if you have more UV seams, you will create more UV island and you will need more space in the UV map. Here I am quickly UV unwrapping everything. It's a simple process, just using all those sharp edges to mark the seams, and then marking additional seams manually to make the UV seams. Also make them straight so you have more space on the UV seam, UV island. Now to create the Highpoly, I first duplicate the Lowpoly and then mark every sharp edge or every edge I want to keep sharp crease, which I don't want to be deformed by subdivision modifier for the Highpoly. So I mark all those edges crease. The process I'm using for the Highpoly, it's called a remesh, or in the ZBrush it's called the dynamesh process. First I add the subdivision modifier, and after that add a remesh modifier, and then use corrective smooth to smooth out all the edges or all the surfaces. If you want a detailed video on this, let me know. I will create a tutorial for this. I repeat the same process for everything. Mark the edges crease which I want to keep, add subdivision modifier, and then remesh and corrective smooth. Or on the edges or on the objects like these discs, I don't want any creases, so I will just add a normal subdivision modifier, or add any loop cut if wanted. Just be careful about a circular or cylindrical object. You don't want to add a subdivision to deform them too much. That's why I bevel them. If they deform too much, they will not align with the Lowpoly, and you will have problems in baking. Here I am cleaning up the geometry for the leaves. So if I add subdivision modifier, it will not work with the n-gons. So at least made them triangles. I am repeating the same process for almost everything, so it's not too complicated, the same steps repeated. And now I move to the sculpting process because I want to add those detail during the sculpting process. Some people add them in the texturing process, but I like it this way because I have more idea of the shapes. In 2D shapes, I'm not very confident with creating those highlights and shadows. So if I have this detail in the Highpoly, I can just bake them and use the curvature and ambient occlusion map to get those details. By the way, I am using my mouse. I don't have a graphic tablet. If I had, it will be a bit better, but the mouse also work. I'm just making the edges bevel to have the more stylized effect on it, and they are not too sharp, but I have like breakups in between. By the way, I will also give the link to the brushes I'm using in the description. They are free. Almost every stylized artist use them. It really helps in creating those stylized details. By the way, just don't go too off from your low poly. Just try to make detail, but don't go too off because you will need to then change your low poly, which I did eventually. So add details, small details, medium details, but keep in mind that you will be baking those details on your low poly mesh. So the process went the same for the other parts of the X, same smoothing out edges and using the brush to break up the edges, giving them the stylized look. If you want, you can skip to the other part. Here adding that feather detail. There were some problems from the Highpoly which I resolved using the smooth brush, sorry. I don't know why, but I spent a lot of time on the feathers. Those were some basic shapes. Now for the grip, I started creating folds in the shape, like they were a bit more like leaves and branches from the forest. I don't know the name of them, but they also don't make any sense, but they look if you give them some random shapes horizontally. One thing I forgot, that the upper part was metal or rock and the bottom part was the wood, but I made them together. Here I am creating those lines in the wood. Now I am using the decimator to reduce the total vertex count of the Highpoly. It doesn't matter on the Highpoly, but if you have too many millions of vertices or triangles, it will slow your process of exporting and baking. So that's why I'm just decimating them. Most of the time 0.1 work, like 0.1 will work with anything. But you can also try going 0.2 or 0.05. Now also remember to name your every object correctly with the LP and HP suffix if you are baking in the Marmoset Toolbag, so that the Marmoset Toolbag can recognize them automatically. I prefer Marmoset Toolbag baking over Substance Painter because I can just change the cage on the fly and also paint the skew, which you will see now. You can just easily paint the skew without doing some tricks here and there. Like you can see, I'm just painting the skew directly in the software. Now the fun part begins of hand painting texturing. Before that, let me resolve some issues. Okay, now the fun part begins. Just import all the maps in the Substance Painter and start texturing. I first started with the smallest object, which is the globe in between. And by the way, just giving the big shape some basic colors so I get an idea of overall shape. Here I am using different kind of color to create the highlights and shadows for the globe or glass. Also I have mirrored the UVs so they will automatically be painted on the other side. I was just painting in and painting out the details to get an idea. I was stuck in it for too long, so I just skipped it and left it as it is, because when you focus on one area too much, you just get frustrated and quit. So that's why it's better to jump between different parts. Here I'm painting the crystal. I use the curvature map to automatically highlight the edges and then hand paint them. Let's make the work a bit faster. And also using the ambient occlusion or invert the curvature map for the inside. Here I am painting the highlights from the reference, which I can see on the reference. The reference was very helpful because I am not very good with the drawings or creating references. If you are in the industry and doing this as a job, they will give you the reference anyway. Now moving to the leaf, just giving it a gradient look, like going from dark to light and again to the dark. You will see again that I was stuck in the leaf for a bit longer than other parts. Just try to avoid doing one part for too long. And also don't try to zoom in a lot like I am doing. Just painting and erasing the details. Now moving on to the wood. I don't even know if it's a wood like a purple color from some fantasy world. Anyway, so I started painting those highlights. There was nothing much to do with the wood because it's just a cylindrical shape. But still you can try to make it interesting looking. Now with the leaves, I use the ambient occlusion map to make the cavities darker or the corners darker than the normal leaf, and then hand painting the highlights. I was avoiding those big parts from the start, but in the end it was time to do them finally. I'm still not very comfortable with the Stylized because it's like my third or fourth acid doing Stylized. I have been doing the realistic firearms from 2-3 years. So I'm used to like spending 7 days, 8 days, maybe 2 weeks in texturing process. Here I totally changed the color from dark gray to purple. First I used the curvature map to mark the highlight, but most of the stuff I did was manually remove them and add them. So I don't know if it was for any benefit. Also, if you use the graphic tablet or anything, maybe a graphic tablet, because there are only graphic tablets, nothing more. Maybe in VR, but if you use your hand strokes or a pen for painting, this will give it more of a texture look or hand painted look. But in my case, I am using the mouse, so it's a bit difficult and taking more time. But still you can see it's possible to do it. Also, don't go to the full dark or full white. You have always avoid those two colors, full white or full black. If you do 2D art, you will know this. By the way, I'm using the knife brush. I think it's called the knife brush in Substance Painter, and give it more of a painted look than the round brush. I also hand painted some those dark areas. Now going for the ring, I painted the dark blue on the bottom of them as in ambient color, because shadows are never black but they reflect the surrounding colors. So I painted them with the dark blue. Also picking color from the reference photo, so make it more similar. This totally took me around 14 hours, but with the timelapse and the magic of editing, you can see it in 30 minutes. In the end, I went to the biggest part of the blade. Maybe you can call it blade or stone. But I had to finally. I was avoiding this from the start. I did it pretty quickly compared to the other part, because I didn't focus too much on it and didn't zoom too much, which I learned in the end. Here I am doing the same thing with the curvature map, first adding that and then adding and subtracting manually. Just using the big shapes to mark the highlights and shadows. Here I am painting that highlight from the diamond on the X. It really changed the overall look of the X. And finally we are done with the texturing, and this was all for the video. I did it in the timelapse because I know no one will watch a 14-hour video of me just modeling and texturing. But if you want me to upload the 14 hours of unedited version, let me know, I will upload it so you can follow step by step. See you later.